Good morning, good day, and good evening. I'm as always your host, Brody Robertson, and today we have Luca, the developer of Distrobox on. Welcome to the show. How's it going?
Thank you for having me.
We originally tried to plan something, when Distrobox first came out?
Yeah, I think a year ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, half and half. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a while ago, that's for sure. And then I think you were busy with some real life stuff, and then I just forgot to get back to you, and now it's 2024.
Yeah. Life got in the way.
Well, I'm happy we're finally getting to do this, and Distrobox is a really cool project. Like, when I first heard about this,
Thank you.
I knew about things like Docker, and I'd used that before. I hadn't used Podman before, but I'd used Docker. I just never really thought of using it as this. But actually, for anyone who doesn't know, just explain briefly what Distrobox is.
It's a a wrapper around Podman or Docker, so free to choose. And instead of using containers to isolate workflows and workloads, it creates containers that are tightly integrated, so the completely opposite. And mainly gives you a userland of whatever nature you want, so whatever distro you want, so that it decouples the userland from the base distro that you have on your host or your laptop, your desktop, where you can do your stuff. So you can install packages, you can develop, you can do games, whatever. The important bit is the tight integration and the possibility of, leveraging, your graphical session, audio, and USB devices, stuff like that, so that it doesn't feel like a container. It feels more like a fancy CH root or something like that.
Yeah,
the idea was to
go.
Yeah.
What I was gonna say, when I first saw it, I sort of thought of it as like a kind of like a Linux subsystem for Linux. You know how like Windows subsystem for Linux is you have this Linux thing running on top of Windows. It's tightly integrated. You can modify your files from your Windows system. Here you can do the same thing. So you're on like Debian, for example, and you want to install an application from the AUR and then access all your Debian files. You could just do that.
Yeah, basically the same as WSL, or I think it's called Crostini on Chrome OS. Their Linux subsystem VM. So instead of using VMs, in this case we are just using plain containers. So performance are definitely better. So the idea was that it's not that different than simply doing a CH root, because I am basically undoing all the compartmentalization and isolation that Podman Docker does by default. But the idea was to leverage their infrastructure. So they have so many images, so many cool things that you can use. Just starting from simple CH roots was just more work at that point. It was easier to just reintegrate the Docker, so went that way. And it's useful for various situations. Personally, it was born because I needed it. So
right. Well, I was going to ask you why you made it. Like, what specific thing was it that caused you to want to go make this?
I was working for a company where they gave me a company laptop. I asked for a Linux laptop, and they actually gave me one. But then you cannot be sudo, because policies, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. It was like an Ubuntu, I think 1804, but it was in 2020, so ancient stuff. And at one point, I just needed to work.
Right.
So I started with simple containers, then one thing leads to another, and here we are.
And well, one of the things that I always found like weird about the project, and it makes sense like at some level, but like the fact that it's all done in Bash script. So I'm sure people have mentioned this. Like,
POSIX shell.
okay, sorry, POSIX
It's
shell.
different.
Sorry,
it's
Uh,
harder.
that's actually a fair point. Okay, why did you want to do it in POSIX shell instead? Like, a lot of people would suggest why not use a common glue language like Python or Perl or something like that. Obviously, doing something like C wouldn't make any sense because you're basically just making Docker and Podman calls. But why not something that's like an actual programming language?
Two reasons actually. One is the fact that it needs to run without except for obviously Podman and Docker,
Sure.
needs to run without dependencies anywhere because if you see how Distrobox is structured, you have various pieces. So you have various utilities. Then you have like the init, which is actually like the init that we inject inside the container, which runs at the startup of the container and does like everything. Let's say that one needs to only run on POSIX stuff because it may have to run on a container that only has POSIX stuff. Let's say Alpine or Void Linux or Gentoo, and I even support Slackware. So I mean, it's I don't know who uses it, but yeah, it needs to run on very lean stuff. And in the end, the init is the biggest part of the whole project and the most difficult part for me, I think. And the others are pretty much smaller utilities, list, RM, I don't know, start, stop. It's very small scripts. Create and enter are a bit bigger, but just because we give some, flags, some interactivity, some options. It's verbose, not difficult. It's long, not difficult. The init is difficult because you have so many things to do.
Right.
To do that integration and so many things to keep an eye on because I don't know, a fix on Ubuntu can break something on Alpine.
Right.
it happened actually, and then add the support for init full system like systemd, OpenRC. Actually, it's supported. It makes obviously difficult, but I wanted something that can run on anything. I didn't want any library hell. So that's one big reason. And I wanted something that was fast, interactive, and easy to contribute to. And in hindsight, probably Golang will be a little bit better in some ways. Not for the init, right? Because that needs to be, a simple shell entry point to be fully compatible with everyone. But then again, if that is the most difficult part and it's done in shell, I may as well do the rest in shell. So
Right. So a init is the thing that actually takes your Docker or Podman container and then makes it this thing that's tightly integrated.
yeah, so there are two phases. In the create, we do some, fancy mounts. Like the key mounts obviously is running the whole root of the host inside run host inside the container. So everything is still accessible inside the container. Then the init is actually like PID1 of the container. So it's like literally an init. And what it does is setting up, the TTY devices, setting up all the various mounts that are needed at runtime, setting up, I don't know, stuff like etc hosts, resolve.conf, all the integration part. And it has, pre and post hooks, so you can customize a bit your init process, integrates the, I don't know, icons, fonts, and stuff like that with the host. And then it either stops there and, just waits so you can do connection to it, or it starts another init. So either systemd or OpenRC, never tried S6, but I mean, stuff like that. And yeah, it's more or less the init in the real sense of the word.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So, just I know there's a lot of people that might not be aware of what like Docker and Podman actually are. So, if you weren't to do any of this, you just left Docker just as Docker normally would work, what would that actually be like for running an application inside of that? And then what sort of changes did you need to make to actually make it usable for what you want to do here?
So, like, if you just do Docker run, I don't know, Alpine or Ubuntu latest, whatever, what you have is a very bare shell. So you have like your like Distrobox, I think, for Alpine and Bash for Ubuntu, and you pretty much have that just it. So you don't have any init process setup. Podman supports starting systemd containers, but then again, you have to use a dedicated image for it because you need to have, systemd inside, and you will have no access to anything in the file system of the host except for volumes that you specify at creation time. You don't have display access, so WLAN, X11, stuff like that. Device access also is inhibited, so you can declare what to access at create time, not at runtime, stuff like that. So a container is not as isolated as a VM, obviously, because we are still using the host kernel. So you have that. So if you have a kernel vulnerability, you pretty much can do whatever. But you have complete userland isolation. So with Distrobox, the work was on undoing that. So yeah, that was the figuring out what to do, still discovering stuff. Obviously, people have crazy use cases and workflows, and yeah, so that's where I still learn that, I don't know, Podman and Docker could do that stuff like that,
Well, this way of using Docker and Podman is obviously not the main intended way, but how much of it was fairly straightforward to get done with something with this Distrobox project, and how much was it of like you had to kind of break some stuff that shouldn't have really worked the way it should? Yeah.
Yeah, I think all the volume part is, the straightforward way. Volume and environment variables are pretty much straightforward. It's when I started Docker, Distrobox. When I started Distrobox, it was, I think, a couple of 100 lines long only, everything. And it was pretty much create with a bunch of volumes hard-coded. And the enter was pretty much like a for loop over, your mvars, so that it appends the mvars and then enter, which it's not that different now. I mean, it's still pretty much that. Obviously, expanding the use cases, we find that, I don't know, how to actually enter what command to execute when you enter the container is actually important. So having, for example, in cases of, I think it was a fix just now in the 1.7 about the when you have an init full container with, for example, systemd, you actually want to do a proper login, so it can give you a login session. So it acts more like a real thing.
Right.
That like let's say it's halfway between what you expect from a normal container and what you expect from an LXC, for example, which acts a little bit more like a VM for you, but it's still a container, right?
Right.
So yeah, it's that part was a little bit bending what is advisable to do with these container managers, but I mean, if you can.
Well, the whole just running like tons of applications inside of a container like this is kind of like not the way that it's typically intended to be used. Like most of the time when people are talking about running Docker, they're talking about running Nginx in a Docker container and then or like Jitsi in a Docker container. It's usually not like, you know, because if you install something like if you have like an Ubuntu container with Distrobox, you might install like 10 or 20 different applications with that, sending all of those applications out of the box, and it's a really different way of working with these containers that I would imagine has caused some kind of headaches along the way trying to work out specific problems.
Less than you think,
Okay.
to be honest. Yeah, what Docker and Podman are by default are application containers. So think of it like a Flatpak, but for service. So you actually just run, I don't know, Nginx, and that's it. I'll just run, I don't know, kubectl, and that's it, just that. But in the end, it's just a Linux userland, so you can actually do what you need. Many containers, like proper ones, only expose one thing. For example, I don't know, the port of one service, but they are running 3 or 4 processes inside for, I don't know, they depend, the service depends on those.
Right.
So it's not a new concept at all. But I'd say we are, with Distrobox and other solution for pet containers like those, which we can talk about later, it's more like an halfway, as I was saying, between let's call it a userland container, so your whole userland, and a system container with which LXC or LXD are, in which you have a container of a whole system. So it's a little bit different from Docker and Podman. But I mean, it's the technology is the same. It's just what you do with that. The technology underneath LXC is the same as underneath Docker. I think Docker, when it started, actually was using LXC under the hood, like the first year it was released or something like that before Containerd. So it's the technology is always the same. So it's not reinventing the wheel.
Right. One of the things I find really cool about Docker is not that it's just this neat little Docker Distrobox. I'm gonna keep doing this. I'm sure you're gonna
probably.
Yeah. Maybe I should just start saying Podman. We'll just forget that Docker exists because I won't mix up Distrobox and Podman. With Distrobox, one of the things I find really, really cool is not that it's just this nice little thing to manage a bunch of tightly integrated containers, but you also have this ability to export applications from the container and just basically treat it like it's just an application on your system. Obviously, there are weird caveats with that with GUI applications. I know on Arch, for example, I had to... There's like a specific thing. You've got it in the like FAQ there to... It's like, I think it doesn't pass in the display or something. I don't remember the exact details. You probably had to report the issue.
Magic cookie.
Yeah.
It's, some systems don't have a magic cookie by default. Like GNOME and KDE for sure does in run, user, whatever. So you can use that magic cookie to have your X authentication working.
Yeah.
But for, I don't know, homemade systems like, a window manager and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was on AwesomeW
you have
at the
to
time.
manually... Yeah, so you have to manually do the X out thing or it won't work.
Yeah, But I find it really cool that you can just export the applications and treat them as if they're just a regular part of your system. And that, I think, is what makes it really, really useful, especially if you just don't want to deal with, like, you want to get it set up and then you just don't want to look at the fact there's a container there. And I get it that some people would want to use it like that, right? Like, it is kind of complicated to have a system in a system, and once you get something set up, you probably just want it to be easily accessible and just there. Obviously, there is that caveat as well where the first time the container opens up when you boot your system, it's going to take a while to do so. But besides that, once it's already running, it just works. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was actually one of the first thing I started introducing when it was still a set of scripts on my laptop. And because it's, actually useful. I mean, it's one of the first thing that I needed, actually. And it was, as with all software, it started easy and then it became quickly complicated. At the beginning, I was exporting like apps, like desktop apps, binaries, and systemd services. But at one point, I introduced like init containers. So I removed the exported service because it doesn't. I mean, it was just simpler to maintain,
Right.
The services inside the container as if it was like with their own init system, whatever. And the apps part was it's a bit of a hack because you have to find the desktop file, set a lot of things, and just to introduce like a prefix of all the Distrobox command and then the original command for the app, and export the icons because you have to show something and stuff like that. So the binary part was plain easy. I mean, it's like just a wrapper that actually runs the Distrobox enter command with your original binary thing. So that was easy. The app part was a little bit more difficult, but it's working well for a while now. Don't see many people complaining, so I'm happy. But yeah, things can always improve on that front. And I think one of the most useful features that because there is a big community, which I thanks everyone. I mean, and we all introduced was the assembly file, which you can declaratively declare your Distrobox with all the packages that you need and declare all the bins and the apps that you want to export so that you don't have to, manually go and export blah, 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 and stuff like that. You can just Distrobox assemble create. It will create all the Distrobox that you have declared, export all the stuff. It's pretty much like, one file fits all for your environment. I use it heavily. For example, in my case, I have like a main Distrobox where, I mean, it's what my terminal opens when I open a terminal, where I live, actually. And I have a little Alpine Distrobox just for one CLI tool, which is GitHub, CLI.
Okay.
Because the Distrobox I use as a userland, which is Tumbleweed, doesn't have it in the repo. So, I mean, I just create another one. And then a rootful one. So, like the container runs as root, which runs the whole libvirt suite. So I have libvirt daemon, virt manager. So all my VMs actually run inside the container. And so I don't have to install anything on the host. It's easily, replaceable. And with assembly, for me, just yesterday I reinstalled my laptop because I wanted to try the new Plasma. And I mean, with one command, I was up and running. So it was pretty useful.
Yeah,
Need a good connection, but yeah, pretty
Oh yeah,
useful.
sure. I still need to try Plasma. The package is finally available on Arch now, so I'm gonna install it after this. I didn't want to do it before the show just in case I broke something. Yeah, so I haven't run like a system update today or anything. Just I want to make sure everything is good. I don't break anything. That's later problem. But
Yeah, I mean, it's I actually used one of the offerings of the UBlue project because it's more up to date than Arch.
I always love when people talk about Arch being like a cutting edge distro. It's not. No, like certain things are cutting edge, and most of it is just happens to be rolling.
Yeah, certain. Yeah.
Yeah, like there.
I think the point is the AUR is cutting edge.
Absolutely, yeah. If you're downloading the latest Git commit, yeah, absolutely. Then, yeah, I try to avoid that with anything that I consider like very important software. Like I don't run Git commit desktops, for example, unless there's like a specific reason for it, like testing something or like there's a known good commit or something like that. The people who just run the latest commit of a project, they are they are living on
brave people.
Yeah, very brave people. Like there was an issue with glibc. This is a don't even consider trying this. But there was an issue with glibc where people were replacing the system glibc with git glibc with a custom patch on it. Like that's really living on,
brave.
the edge.
I think it might be a little bit harsh, but I think people doing that are either doing that on on a spare computer just for fun, which I completely agree on.
Yeah,
like having your experimental PC on one side, but if they're doing them on their main PC, I really doubt they are doing anything with that PC anyway. Like I wouldn't risk breaking my main PC just for a glibc patch or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm pretty much on the immutable system train, mostly for the reliability of them. If you have a problem, you just roll back, and it's very, very improbable that they break by themselves. Even though, like on the main PC, I'm using Ion, which is the immutable of OpenSUSE. And
right.
I mean, if you don't touch it, it works. It's a rolling release, so I have stuff pretty new. The base is very minimal. Like if you remove all the Flatpak, you just have GNOME settings terminal files, and I think that's it. Something like that. It's very bare bones. Everything is Flatpak or Distrobox. So everything is modular on that point of view, and I think I'm doing the same. I will do the same with the Kinoite.
That's as close as I would get. Yeah, I'm not sure how to say it either.
The KDE Atomic.
Yeah, we'll go with that one. That works much better.
On the other laptop, so pretty much, it's very improbable. It's rawhide, so it's like running Arch with testing repos. So it's pretty much experimental. It's pretty solid in the end, but it can happen that I don't know, they change something in the repos, something breaks it. We are human, it can happen.
Sure.
But I have more, let's say, guarantees that my laptop will turn on when I need it, which in my experience years ago wasn't the case with Arch.
There's an issue. Well, not an issue. It's more of a package that was updated. Let me just find what it was. It is MKNet CPIO. There was an update to that which moving to version 38, there was a change to how the microcode like load line is done, and they have basically no explanation in the Arch news about what needs to be done. If you want to know the change that needs to be made, you actually need to go to like Reddit and other places like that where people have the list of commands to run.
Yeah, for me it was very, I mean it was probably like 2016 or 17 I used Arch last time. And I was using it on my trusty ThinkPad, and I was preparing for an exam at university, and it decided not to boot anymore. So while I was following a session, I created a Fedora USB and reflashed it, and yeah, that was the tipping point where I decided, okay, experiments for something, a dedicated laptop or a VM or whatever. Sometimes I still, create a VM just to enjoy the rising, but for my laptop, I need it to work. I don't dare. I just use it as an appliance, actually. Like turn it on and whatever, do its job and turn it off. It's not. I experiment on other things.
So it sounds like for like your main systems, you're pretty much all in either Fedora land or something based on Fedora. Why am I getting a call?
No. Yeah.
Give me a second.
No.
Sorry.
Yeah.
One sec. I'm just getting a phone call. I'll just tell them to go away. Okay, we're good. I got a call from my mum. Okay. It's fine.
It's important to.
It wasn't anything. She probably just wanted to chat. I'll call her again afterwards anyway. Yeah. So you were saying something about. I mentioned you're doing a lot of like using a lot of Fedora stuff or Ublo or whatever that sort like. And you were saying something.
I use mainly SUSE and Fedora right now.
Right.
But I'm experimenting
right.
another laptop for Vanilla OS. And yeah, I really like where everything is going. They are the three main, let's say, philosophies of immutability that I see they are taking steps in the mainstream, and I like. Let's say I like where everything is going. I like that you can customize either Ublu or Vanilla OS with plain Docker files, right? You can create your own system pretty easily and still have the guarantees of solidity, of reliability that the system can offer you. When people say that, that's why probably immutable is not the right term.
I like Atomic. I think Atomic is a better term for it.
Atomic is much better, yeah. And they are not customizable. It's not true at all. But I think it's just they are customizable in a different point in time.
Yes, exactly.
They are not customizable easily. I mean, you can still do it. You can do anything. I mean, at runtime. But they are extremely, even more customizable if you think about it at build time, because then you're just building whatever you want. You're not adding or removing the bloating or that stuff that people do with scripts. You're just doing it you create your what it's called the golden image in the cloud, in the cloud. When we are in the cloud and we create our VMs for something, because like, for example, VMs to run Kubernetes, where then you run your containers for application containers. VMs are pretty much golden images. You create the image of that VM, and when you have to update it, you just create a new image of that VM. It's not like apt blah, 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 or whatever, DNF, whatever. So I think taking this concept back to the desktop, it's extremely important. Obviously, desktop is much more difficult on that point of view than servers, because desktop are much more versatile than servers. Because servers, I mean, they mostly do one thing, which is serve. Desktops, I mean, you have many, corner cases, many different hardware, many things. I mean, I don't know. Just think about NVIDIA stuff or AMD GPU stuff, the proprietary one. So it's not as easy. So I like how Ublu is and Vanilla are making more mainstream to having custom images for stuff.
Yeah.
Like you have, I think the concept was firstly introduced by Pop! OS actually, to have like a dedicated NVIDIA image and an AMD and Intel one. Now you have like proper images based desktop with this concept. I think Ublu cranks it to 11, where you can choose even for some laptops a dedicated image. Like I know that they support the framework laptop, like with a dedicated framework image. So this opens up to, I think, like easily for OEMs to create their own stuff. They just have to create their own container file and point, I don't know, that distro to update on a specific registry, and they pretty much have done. They don't need dedicated repos for each model or stuff like that. It will make OEM stuff, I think, pretty much a breeze for them. Like,
Yeah, I've talked about this plenty of times, and I'm sure people are sick of me saying it. I feel the exact same way that you do about the immutable atomic images. We're just going to call them atomic because it's a better term.
yeah.
I feel like the problem that has existed, and the reason why people do think that they're just not customizable, is there just hasn't been that same level of exposure and same level of documentation on how to do that customization. Because if you want to go and if you want to go and install a package on Fedora, it is very well documented how to do that, how to remove packages, how to add new repos, all of that sort of stuff. But this whole idea of using an image on the desktop, using this atomic system, that's a fair, it's been around for a bit, but as a mainstream thing that people do, really only the past couple of years, and really only recently because of things like Flatpak and Distrobox that make it a lot easier to install applications that aren't there as part of the image, is becoming more and more popular. And thanks to projects like Ublu, actually customizing the image it's still obviously different, and it's still obviously a challenge to a lot of people, but the documentation is being put together, and there is being progress made towards people understanding that you actually can mess with these systems. It's just not the way that you've traditionally done it.
Yeah. I think the important part, both Ublu and Vanilla, they leverage something that exists in the past, I don't know, 10, 15 years, because Docker images are pretty much the standard in the real work world, right? And it's a skill that you can upcycle in the desktop environments thing, so that not doing their own stuff. They are just leveraging something that already exists. Is very important for the skill set and the documentation, because when one will search how to do something in Dockerfile, they will find plenty of stuff on whatever, Stack Overflow, Google, DuckDuckGo, whatever. And that's the important part. Instead of doing their own whatever, make my image dot py stuff, whatever it is. That's the I think that's the winning point, is upcycling existing skills from the server part, where I mean Linux is pretty much the, I don't know, 90 something percent, something like that.
I wouldn't be surprised the
And
number's something like that. Yeah.
and upcycle it on the desktop so that you can leverage, pretty high, pretty large skill set.
Mhm.
So that's I think that's the most important part. I think the immutability, atomicity, and stuff like that is they are let's call them good side effects that you find along the way to come to these image-based desktops, right? Because the only way to have an image-based desktop is to actually then be atomic, immutable, and so on. It's like a dependency, right? And I think it's just shifting the point of view completely. But yeah, you have many, let's say, many good side effects, but then you have to change the perspective on how you do things. It's not that you cannot do things, you just have to do things differently.
Well, on the topic of these atomic systems, I did bring up in there that Distrobox is really, it has changed the way that people are able to actually use these systems. Same with Flatpak. Flatpak obviously has done this as well, but just having full access to a non-atomic system on top of this atomic system, because previously you could obviously do overlays, which then cause issues because if you have a bunch of overlay packages, especially OS tree, a lot of overlay packages tends to cause the update process to slow down quite a bit. But just not doing that and instead having all of this done in the user directory, which is perfectly writable and is not going to cause that to be an issue whatsoever, I think that has made it a bit more accessible because obviously you can customize it, yeah, but a lot of people are not going to take that step. And then on something like, I've got a Steam Deck back there, it making that your own image, there's like no documentation for that. You need to make something entirely custom. So it really does just make working with these systems quite a bit easier and at least gets your foot in the door where then if you feel more comfortable, then you can actually go that extra step and make your own custom image that is truly your system image.
Yeah, I think the idea of pet containers, so it's a container that you don't actually just create and destroy on the spot for your application or whatever, which is how usually Podman and Docker works, right? Pet containers is a container that you care of, so because you install manually stuff in it. The concept was actually already in Fedora using Toolbox,
Yes.
which is their pet container tool. And when Distrobox was created, it was like a couple of years ago, I think. I think 2021. So yeah, probably something more. It was still like a Fedora only thing. So that's why probably Distrobox was very useful to other immutable distributions, so that they had their tool too. And I remember like 2-3 years ago that they were speaking about like replacing the whole terminal with Toolbox at the time. So it's not a new concept, right? It's something that obviously was needed. I think that we are in a transitional phase now. There are various ways where you can work, let's say, around the immutability when you need stuff,
Right.
to actually get done. And there are obviously Flatpaks or graphical applications. There I say snaps. But yeah. And
There's app images as well.
there are these. Sorry?
There's app images as well.
App images when they work. And there are then the containers part. But then containers can be used in multiple ways. There are dev containers, and there are like pet containers. So like Distrobox, Toolbox. And I think what for developers is really important is to start adopting more dev containers, which is an extension that, like a protocol, let's call it, that Microsoft created, where you can use them with pretty much any IDE or editor, like VS Code, JetBrains, that stuff, where when you clone a project, all the bits and stuff actually run inside a SAID container. So you don't have to actually install, I don't know, JVM or Golang or Rust stuff inside your host, but inside the container.
Right.
And it's not a pet container, so you can destroy it and recreate it. It's all specified in that file. So that should be probably what people will need to learn to, go to, because in the when we speak about the development experience, Linux is actually the odd one where you actually install stuff on your system, because like the second the two most popular OSs for cloud native stuff are Linux and macOS. Someone uses Windows too, but I mean it's still WSL, so we are pretty much on the same boat. And then it's very rare that just open the terminal and start installing stuff. They either use something in their home like Brew, or they just use dev containers. There are many tools, like the one at my company we do. It's called DevPod, that helps using them in a very fruitful and easy way, right? You just have like this application when you create your project. You slap the the URL of the GitHub page and start. I don't know. You choose VS Code. You just start it, and starts with already the container provisioned with whatever it needs to develop. You don't need to even think about dependencies and stuff like that. On the other side, there are people like me that develop in Vim, where you actually need a full terminal, and that's where pet containers are good. You create your own development container where you do stuff, and probably the best thing there is to start adopting assemble files so that you can easily recreate and refresh your container. It happened many times that I just mess around and break stuff, so I just need to rebuild it, and finding back all the stuff that I installed is a pain. So having some way to recreate as it was is really useful. And I envision a point where we will come to a stage where actually installing stuff on the base system isn't even needed anymore, like at all. We will either have custom images or we will have containers. That's it.
So, if I'm understanding correctly, sort of keeping the host system clean of the development environment, because we already do this to a certain extent, right? Where you will install project-specific libraries. Take, for example, like a Python VMF. Like, you will install libraries in, like, for that specific environment. But you're saying take that a step further and move the development tooling completely off of the host and do everything inside of a container. So you don't have cargo, for example. You don't have cargo installed on your host system. It is done entirely in the container, and then all of the libraries are done in that container as well.
Yeah, exactly. And that is important not only for, I don't know, I mean, modern languages pretty much have ways to work around this breaking of the system, right? Like Rust, Go, put your stuff in your home usually, and they don't really need many dependencies, right? You just have Rust app, or in case of Go, you just have the Go binary, actually. And with Python, you have pyenv, but for other things, it's not the same. I don't know, let's think about having to develop a C or C++ project. You still have to install, lib something devel, or, that stuff, which it still mess up your system in a way or another, because most package managers don't have an undo button, right? You have to remember what you did and undo it if you want to undo it. And this leads to also a lot of errors in the development phase or even in packaging phase, because working with containers, which are pretty much super minimal images, right? Like the Alpine one is 5 megabytes, something like that. The Ubuntu one, which is one of the largest, is 40. They are not big at all. And starting some apps there, you see how many things are missing because they were part of the base image, and people just took it for granted. So the packages are actually not declaring all their dependencies. They're declaring some of their dependencies. And the same goes for the development part, where you go into a README and say, oh, you need these libraries. And then it doesn't work because they are taking for granted some libraries that were already on the system.
This is something I'll see, especially if something is packaged with Ubuntu in mind, and then you want to install it on something like Arch. They will assume things are there that were just there from Ubuntu, whereas they are not necessarily a part of a minimal system. And you've got to it'll give throw some error, like random things like that. One example I actually had recently is Hyperland. I was doing some debugging, and the dev wanted me to compile stuff, and he had no documentation on what needed to be included for the build. So the Hyperland wouldn't build without Doxygen, for example, installed. And so I had to install Doxygen, I had to install this, I had to install this, and I had to install this, because none of that was actually documented, because on his system, he had those installed already, so it's not going to ever throw that build error. And I get exactly what you're saying here. That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice thing to have both on the development side, so that you are less prone to those errors. Also on the, let's say, distribution side, so on the fruition side, like for you, I think you like your system to be as lean as possible, right?
And then, yes. Also, it breaking is content.
Yeah, I mean, okay, but I think for a person that is thinking about setting up their own minimal operating system with a window manager, Rofi, and stuff like that, at least the point for me is thinking about having it as lean and optimized as possible, that I can maximize what I do. So, for example, stream or develop or stuff like that. And then you have to install Doxygen. So, I mean, doesn't make sense, right? To have so many compilation dependency in a system just to run something that then doesn't depend on it. And then if you just want to install, compile, and then clean up, the cleanup part is not a given.
Yeah.
Not many. I think just one package manager supports undo, which is DNF.
I didn't know that.
It's not always possible. Yeah, DNF has history, undo, and then you say the transaction ID, and then it will undo that. The point is that if in the meantime something updated, and then, for example, in that transaction, you went from htop 1.1 to 1.2, then it will try to downgrade it to 1.1. But if it's not in the repos anymore, you cannot undo stuff.
Right.
So it's not a perfect thing. It's something which not many other package managers do.
Mhm.
But still, it's an incomplete process of cleanup. While if you just have your own, package compiling environment, you can just scrap that in a second.
This is not a problem that most normal people have, but I also have an issue with installing random applications. I'll do videos on, like, I don't know, some HTOP clone or some random thing, and I will have hundreds of packages that I forgot I installed, and every time I do a system update, I'm just like, wait, why do I have, what is that application again? Why is that installed?
Why have 1 gigabyte of updates?
1 gigabyte's a small update. Yeah, I just have all of these extra things installed. Because I forget to remove them after I do the video, and then it's not just the application, it's the dependencies for the application. And I probably should just do these inside of a container. And the next time I clean my system, which is just delete the Arch install and just redo an Arch install or replace it with something else if I decide to do that, I probably should just start doing those inside of a container, just so I can get rid of it when I'm done with it.
A nice thing will be to use also a custom home for the container.
Mm.
Like with Distrobox, you can use a -- home flag during the create. It will use as a home directory for the user inside the container that directory, but still has access to the original directory. So if you enter the container inside your project to develop, you still have access to that project inside your home directory. But all dot files and configs go to that home, the custom one, so it doesn't litter your own home.
Right.
So if you try a lot of applications, then you don't have all those dot blah 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 rc all dot, or for example, you want, I don't know, something to be configured differently, like 2 instances of the same application but differently configured. Let's say you want Discord with multiple accounts, Signal with multiple accounts, stuff like that. You can just use a different home for each one, and then the configs go in different points. So it's like having a clean installation, and then you do whatever you want.
I'm going to send you an image. This is my .config directory. I don't know how many of these applications I still have installed. That's not all of it. It's just what I could fit on one screenshot.
That's a lot.
It keeps going further. There's probably like another, because it ends at O. There's still like probably another 100 more in there.
I think I will just quickly do .config and then word count. I have 40 things in my .config, so I like to keep it clean.
Yeah.
I don't even use custom home, to be honest, but yeah.
Yeah, but like this is my point. Like I'll install a bunch of things, and it's not just the application, because then I have to like clean up other things that it comes with that might not necessarily be cleaned up by the package manager, like the config files or any other files that might litter across your system that aren't managed by the package manager. Instead, they're generated by the application. Yeah.
So it's useful to have this type of separation, so you can keep your system doing its job. I mean, the system jobs is to be a system, not to be your application thing. Like an application is an application, it's not the system, right? I think having this separation, like Flatpak does very well, it's extremely important. So I think starting doing that for other things is also pretty much useful for everyone. It's just a matter of taking the routine of doing it.
Right. Yeah. And that's also the other big thing, because I can start doing something, and then the second you stop, then it's like, well, I've stopped now, so why don't I just keep it going? So
yeah.
What I also wanted to ask you about was, so back when I like first looked at Distrobox, you supported Docker and Podman, which for the most part work in fairly similar ways. But you also have this other thing now called Lilypod. What is that, and why? Why? Yes,
Uh,
just why.
why not?
Fair.
But yeah, mainly was a project that I started to really learn all the bits and bobs
Mhm,
underneath for how the container works.
mhm,
So I just wrote my own container manager,
mhm,
and it actually seems to work decently.
mhm,
And the idea was to have something with less as few dependency as possible to
mhm,
run. It's like a single statically compiled binary in Go, so it's don't really have any dependency except BusyBox.
mhm,
I pretty much think anyone has a core utils on a
mhm,
system. Um, but the idea was to have a nice fallback for system where you want to run your Distrobox or whatever, but installing Podman or Docker is pretty huge, right? You have many dependencies, you have configurations to do and stuff like that. So with Lilypod is plug and play. You don't have any configuration to do any dependency.
mhm,
Obviously, those like I don't even think 1/10 of the things that Podman does is even probably less. But
mhm.
the point is doing what Distrobox needs. It's
Mhm.
not doing what Podman does,
Right.
and it does. And I'm happy about it. Need to, yeah, update that one too.
Mhm.
There are many things to. It's like a really alpha release, beta release, whatever. It's very new,
Mhm.
very new, and it's more like an emergency latch for when you cannot run one of the big two. And on that front, I also developed this Podman launcher, which is just using Go embedfs to just embed everything, every dependency of Podman inside it,
Mhm.
and just run it as a single binary. So also that one works. It's
Mhm.
like a very big binary. It's like I think 50, 60 megabytes because everything is inside. It works like an exe on Windows, right? It's
Mhm.
actually just an archive, a self-executing archive, but in this case of Podman.
Mhm. Mhm.
So there is that one too. And then I discovered that also it was mainly for system like the Steam Deck where you didn't have Podman, Docker, stuff
Right.
like that. And installing them is a bit of a pain because at the next update it gets deleted.
Mm.
So I wanted something that runs from your home and stays there. Uh, but I think now they are shipping Podman by default, so it's already a big thing.
Where was it? Yeah, I didn't know about that until I saw like the Steam Deck just. I don't know what the developers are doing, but they just add random cool things from time to time. Like not too long ago, they were like, "Here, have NixOS package support." Like, why? Sure, okay, let's have it. Then they're like, "Oh,
Okay, thank you. But
yeah." Then like, "Here, have Distrobox." I know you said it was like a really old version of Distrobox, but like even so, they
yeah,
just
it's like 1.4.
like the fact they just added it to the system. They're like, ah, okay, yeah. Uh,
I was surprised.
because before it,
Didn't know anything, so
like before you had documentation for it, but it's yeah, it's still like nice to just have it there and just not have to really think about
yeah,
it.
yeah, absolutely. Especially on a system which is atomic and image based, but you cannot do the image,
Mm,
like in the case of the Steam Deck. Um, you, I think it's a perfect example of how this image based stuff really benefits the OEMs
mm,
because it's incredibly easy for them to have a known golden state for the system. obviously they control the hardware, but this way they also control the software because everyone has the same version,
Mhm.
or less. Everyone has the same, set of packages by default because every update resets them actually.
Mhm.
So they can also just say, hey, something is misbehaving, just reset it,
Mhm.
which is not a given in the Linux world, even the Windows world, to be honest. But just factory reset is not a thing,
Mm.
which is, I think, for the OEMs will be the first thing, like having a factory reset button like Android does, where you just wipe it and only the system is kept in its original state, which is a known state. It makes also reproducing issues easy because, for example, already now, I think for image-based OS like Vanilla OS and Fedora, doing a bug report where you explicitly say, I am on this version
Mhm.
and these are the overlaid packages or added packages. Me, as a developer, I can reproduce the exact system, just putting the same version and same packages.
Mhm.
We are on the same, pretty much the same system, except maybe the hardware. And you can already figure out, okay, this is an hardware problem, a software problem. I can reproduce or not, or stuff
Mhm.
like that. It's much easier. And yeah, I mean, it goes back to what we were saying before, where in which state is your system.
Mm.
You don't know your Arch Linux in which state it is, right? And at least knowing it is a good thing.
Well, also just having that really convenient system rollback there, because most atomic systems do provide like at least 2 or 3 of the previous images. So if for any reason the latest image is broken in some way, like maybe they decided to ship an application and they didn't test something properly and the application's broken, in most cases you can just roll back and just it works. And then maybe the future version
Yeah.
is working, then you just go straight to that one. And your user data is completely separate from that. So like obviously you can do this with a non-immutable system. You can have a root that is separate from your home directory, and you can reinstall the ISO and go to a different version. And this is doable. It's just a lot of extra work that with a system like this, there are these ideas put in place that you can just very conveniently make use of, and I think it's really cool. And I do understand
Yeah,
that
I mean,
for
it's
an I was gonna say like for an
no,
OEM like that makes a lot of sense why you'd want to do that. And
okay.
with like the factory reset, not just a factory reset, but just a system reset. So if the user did break something by installing overlay packages or something, you can just fix the system by itself without breaking their user data.
Yeah, and to be honest, there are other systems, not immutable ones,
Mhm.
that do something similar. Like if you install Tumbleweed by default, they already have BTRFS snapshots connected to the zipper package manager.
Mhm.
I think you can do the same with Arch also,
Yeah, you
where
can.
every transaction first does a snapshot of the running system and then executes the transaction. So the difference in that is that you still have rollback points, which is already a big win, but you are still modifying your running system. So the difference between having Tumbleweed with BTRF snapshots and Eon or MicroOS, which is the atomic version, is that you're never changing your running system,
Hmm.
because many times it happens that update a library and then all application running starts freaking out
Yup.
because that library has been updated at runtime. And I think most of the breakages that happens is this, because there is this conception that you don't need to reboot to update
I
Linux.
hate these people so
Um,
much. I really hate
yeah,
anyone who says
exactly.
that.
I mean, if you think about it, stuff like systemd updating, do you really think you don't need a reboot for that?
You can technically like there are things that can be done. You're just probably not doing them. That's the issue.
Exactly. So it's very important that the state of the running system doesn't change under the hood whilst it's running. So that's why the reboot is important. I think the introduction of the offline updates, I think Fedora was one of the first with, the GNOME software that actually does the Windows thing where you reboot into an update and then it reboots back. Already improved a lot the reliability, I think, because not changing. Think about like updating DNF using DNF. I mean, how well can it go while you're running your system? It can break something. That's why it's important to have both the rollbacks and the immutability part, because that's where the reliability comes from.
Yeah, one place that does certainly cause issues is out of tree modules, out of tree kernel modules. So a while back I was using v4l2 loopback. If you've never used that before, it's basically a way to take a camera device and then create virtual camera devices and loop them in, because you can't have multiple applications that access the same camera. This just lets you create virtual cameras. If you update your kernel and you update the module, applications be like, what? Where's the module? I don't know where it is.
Yeah. Also, just also think about AK mod or DKMS type of out of tree kernel modules, and switching to an image-based system where the modules and stuff are built upstream, not downstream. They are not built by your laptop, they are built by the servers. And if something goes wrong, like they don't compile, they simply don't ship the update. So it's even a prevention thing. It's not only a rollback thing, right?
Right, because you hear people say things like, I lost power during an update and I bricked my system.
It happened to me various times, actually. Like when you're old laptop, and you really trust the battery applet.
Yeah.
They say, okay, it's 1 hour, and then in 10 minutes it's discharged because it's very, very old HP.
Yeah.
And
it's 1 hour when the hard drive is not being smashed, and then the second you're hitting a bunch of data, well, bye.
Yeah, it happened, and I think it was like on Ubuntu, something like 12 something, 12.04, something like that. And yeah, the only way to fix that was to reinstall because it actually freaked out. I don't remember which very important part, if it was the init or the glibc during the unpacking. So it was pretty much unrecoverable at the time. So yeah, tough stuff.
Yeah, distro, like, no matter what distro you use, if you're using something that is not... Well, this is the big thing about atomic. Like, I guess for anyone who doesn't know, just what does it mean for something to be atomic? Because I would imagine some people haven't just heard that term before.
It's either you do the stuff or you don't. So when we have something that it's not in one go, for example, updating a system, which, I don't know, can take even 500 or 600 steps. It depends on how many packages you have. And each package is a step, if you think about it. There are ways, at least 600 ways things can go wrong. And you will be left with a system that is in a, let's say, hybrid state. It's not done, but it's not as it was before. Let's say you need to update 600 packages and it breaks at the package number 300. The previous 300 packages were updated. the next one not, but maybe something in the previous 300 packages depend on the after 300 packages. So you're in a broken state. I think I don't know how much this is common, but back in the day it was. I remember in the times of, I don't know, it was Fedora 20, something like that. I broke Python in an update, and DNF broke because DNF was in Python. So it was pretty much unrecoverable because Python updated before DNF in the pipeline, on the list of packages. So having this all or none deal is very important for the stability of the system. And you can achieve this in various ways. One is the image-based way, like Vanilla and Ublu does, where you just download a big image and just unpack it somewhere. In case of OS3, you have your deployments. In case of Vanilla, you literally have another partition where you deploy that image fully or not. If something goes wrong, you just abort the procedure and you don't touch the original files. Or there are approaches like Eon and MicroS, where you actually create a new BTRF as snapshots of the running system and then perform the transaction inside that snapshot. So you don't touch your running system. And then at the end, if something goes wrong, you just delete the snapshot. Nothing happened. So if the snapshot is there, it means that everything went well. So you have the atomicity done in this way, where everything goes well and you have the snapshot, or you don't have a snapshot. So that's where the atomicity comes from, and they have the advantages. But to have true atomicity, you also need immutability, because you don't have to change the running system in ways that are not atomic. And that's where the confusion comes from when we speak about immutable system and atomic system and stuff like that.
You touched on this before, but I think it's important to hammer home. We are seeing a lot of these sort of cloud-based concepts coming to the desktop, and atomicity is kind of one of them as well, because that's very much a very common database concept. Like, you want your database calls to run in an atomic way where you're not updating you don't want to update a user record and not update the entire record. You want that entire thing to take place in a single action. We're seeing containers come to the desktop, and I know, like, people have their opinion of, like, I think a fair thing to have an opinion on is, like, the serverless space, where people are getting these wild, like, I don't know if you saw this recently. There was someone who, they were running one of the, I hate the term serverless, it's really stupid, but they were running the free tier of whatever platform they were on, Netlify, and they had their website on there, and it had like a MP4 file, and people started like smashing that file, and they were hit with $104,000 bill because they didn't actually have a cap on how much data could be used. Luckily, after it got a bunch of attention, they ended up dropping the bill. But besides that part of the web, that's a part that's certainly an issue. But all of this really cool tech on the web, I think, does have a place on the desktop. But because we've done things in the way that we've always done them, I get why there's like some pushback on the way it's being done, because it is different, and change is weird, change is scary, and
obviously,
yeah, I don't ever see a point where like immutable distros become the only thing available. This is Linux. People are going to do things that they want to do, but I could see a place where the more mainstream offerings, they are these. They at least have the option of having an atomic system. Ubuntu has that. They're doing their thing. Fedora obviously has their thing. And I could see other distros doing this as well. And it's, as more distros do it, we're going to
think
start...
of the major one, just like the major baked one. Only Ubuntu is still missing one. I think they are doing something later in the year, the Ubuntu Core Desktop, but SUSE has one, OpenSUSE has one, Fedora has one, many actually. There is Vanilla OS. I think there are also various Arch-based things.
Yes. I think it's interesting with the Fedora case because they actually do want to make the Atomic version like kind of the main like go-to version. Like this is the version like you default to. Obviously, if you want to use Workstation, its normal state, that's going to be there. But for like the average user, there is this push towards getting that to a state where it actually is just the thing that people want to go to.
I think it makes sense. I mean, thinking about it, who are generally people using laptops or desktops or whatever? They're either the very basic, let's say, Chromebook-like use, where you just browse, mail, videos, whatever. Do you really need to DNF stuff? No. You can do everything with Flatpaks. So there it goes. Then there is the developer using, Linux for development, and from that point of view, they should. I mean, if you are a developer and not using containers in 2024, I will do, some update course probably, because I mean it's the standard industry standard in the last 15 years probably. So the developer doesn't have that many problems in using an Atomic desktop, and the problem arises only on people using either really really low level type of development. I don't know, you develop the kernel or systemd or I don't know, something really. Then okay, you know better than anyone else how to keep your system probably, and or people that just want to have fun. And for those, the normal spin is the best bet, I think. But for how many use Linux just for fun? And I think it's a minority, a vocal minority. Like, obviously it's fun. I have fun using Linux, but I also need it to work, So that's why I think it's a sensible default to have the Atomic version be the default. I don't know if we are still there, but we are going in that direction pretty fast, I think. Because if you think about how old is the mainstreaming of this type of distros, and think about like how slow is the adoption of stuff especially in the desktop world where change is bad, right? I think we are actually not going that slow at all.
I've said it before, but I think what is speeding it up is having things like Distrobox and Flatpak that do make it so you don't have to build your own image. Because the building your own image part to get applications installed, that's like that's a non-starter for a lot of people. Especially if you are that kind of person who is I'm using the laptop to run Chrome. Like, for those people, they want to just be able to easily install applications and not really think about the technical stuff. I think with better tooling, better documentation, the people who do use Linux for fun will still have a place on those immutable systems. Like, they will have, like, if you enjoy messing around, like, writing your system, I can see you being the kind of person who enjoy making these weird Docker files to have your system build in a very specific way so you can deploy that on each of your devices and maybe have like a slightly different version for your laptop and then a slightly different version for your desktop and all of this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, people are already pretty much invested in dot files, for example, right? And it's not that different of a concept. It's just add this file to your Docker file, is to your dot files. So the Docker file is in your dot files. And I mean, there are plenty of GitHub actions for free that will build the image for you, and you are pretty much done.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of having .files just be the config of the system, it's the system. That's a pretty big shift on one side, but if you think about it, it's the natural extension of what one expects of doing. I mean, with many people do the same with NixOS, right? With where you have this file that pretty much dictates how your system is. That's the same concept, but in let's say in a more popular and common technology.
Yeah, the NixOS people, they were for years now. People are like, "Hey, you can do a NixOS video." Like, maybe. Look, people talk about how
I didn't.
Go on.
No.
I was gonna say people talk about how Arch users like to talk about how they run Arch all the time, but you've never spoken to a NixOS user if you think that's the case. They are very, very, very happy to tell you about how great NixOS is.
I mean, we are all in the same boat. Like, if outside of the Linux world, they say the same about the Linux.
Sure,
crowd,
yeah.
So it's relative. It's relative,
Mm-hmm.
but technically, I think it's a good solution. Like I tried NixOS in the past. I think it was last year actually, and I didn't necessarily find it difficult. It was pretty much easy to just install and then take the configuration.nix that it's populated by default and then start from there. The problem is that not being a standard file system brings a lot of quirks that then people need to account for. It's the same thing. Change is bad, change scary. So it's just a different set of things that one has to account for. Sometimes that's worth it and sometimes it's not. What I like about the current situation with Atomic desktops is there is change involved, but not change in skills. It's just a change in mindset.
Right.
While with Nixes, it's also a change in skill because you need to learn how Nix works, which is not a given that everyone is able to, program or properly search what to do and stuff like that. It's like when the difference between using Vim and NeoVim, where with Vim is pretty much a config file. The vimrc for you is pretty much a config file. And the NeoVim in Lua, I need to learn Lua, which is a good skill. It does amazing things. But what if I just want an editor and start programming and I don't want to program in Lua? Right? So it's pretty much the same thing. It's very good, but very involved. You need a lot of effort. On the other side, I feel like the regular distros going Atomic is a little bit less effort on the user side. There's a lot of effort on the distribution development side, but
sure. So
yeah.
I want to talk about some of the cool stuff that that's just been done with Distrobox, because you've got a bunch of stuff highlighted here, like people running their desktop environment inside of Distrobox. Like, that's just like
it was an experiment. Many people actually took it pretty seriously. I mean, it works. Then you actually, there is a little difference, is that then you actually live inside the container, because you log in inside the container, then you don't see the host stuff anymore, because regular application are not visible and stuff like that. I think it's useful more for testing stuff or extreme cases. Okay, but that's why I have the disclaimer that it's a very experimental thing, because then people will report bugs about very crazy stuff, which, to be honest, as the maintainer of the project, I don't necessarily care about. Like, it's not really in scope of what Distrobox is or does. I'm happy people experiment with stuff, and because that will highlight problems that were just dormant somewhere, right? But yeah, at one point you need to draw a line and say, okay, this is in scope, this isn't in scope, or it will become unmanageable pretty quickly.
Right. Because there's all manner of things that you could do with it. Like, I saw this other one where it's like Japanese input on clear Linux inside of Distrobox. like you can do a lot of things with this, and you can. It's just like there comes a point, right, where it's just, what is the goal of the project, right? Like, are you trying to support applications, like normal applications that most people are going to run? But there's going to be these weird applications that aren't normal. Like, you know, a text editor, it doesn't matter what text editor it is, most of them are going to run in a fairly similar way. But there are applications that have very low-level access. There are applications that run in really bizarre ways and need access to weird things. And you just have to, at some point, say, well, okay, it can probably work, but is this something that I want to put my effort into? I'm sure if someone, like, had specific patches to address some, like, weird case like this, like, you'd probably accept it. But, you know, at some point you have to decide, like, how much do I want to put in these, maybe like one person is using out there.
Yeah, I mean, as long as they do the patch, I'm happy. Like, if I don't have to, I mean, as long as it's not like a refactor of, I don't know, half of the project just to support one use case. If it's just, I don't know, a little patch where, I don't know, something was missing or something was made optional, you're welcome. That's not the problem. That's good. The problem arises when either people are trying to really use, let's say, not in a wrong way, because I don't think, I mean, when you have a tool, you can still use a screwdriver as a hammer. You're free to do that. But it's your problem to use that in that way. Don't come upstream and say, hi, I used to use this as a hammer. Now I need to use it as a, I don't know, a drill. It's a bit like, I don't know if with the XKCD about the overheating CPU key.
Oh, yes,
part of the workflow. That one. So yeah, there is a point where we are in that situation, right? And you have to say no. You have to decline gently the thing, because maybe it's very, very unique and very, very much involved. So that's not worth it.
For anyone who hasn't seen that XKCD, so it's about a fixing like a bug where if you hold down the spacebar, the CPU overheats. And a user writes, "This update broke my workflow. My control key is hard to reach, so I hold spacebar instead, and I configured Emacs to interpret a rapid temperature rise as control." Admin writes, "That's horrifying." The user writes, "Look, my setup works for me. Just add an option to re-enable spacebar heating." Like, yeah. No, I think it's like a good thing, like, it sort of like relates to like what Linus has said in the past many times, where if a bug is being used by users, it's no longer a bug, it's now a feature. And that can cause issues, depend like how seriously you take that, right? Because if it's like a serious bug, people might have workarounds specifically designed around that, and maybe that is a bug you want to do, but no matter what sort of change you make, you're likely going to run into some sort of breaking change for a user if you have enough people with like eyes on the application.
Actually, like it depends on the software we are talking about. Obviously, something as important as the kernel.
Absolutely, yeah.
You don't want it to break workflow. Something like Distrobox in the end. How many people really care about it? Like I introduced a breaking bug fix in the 1.7 because we changed the way you enter the Distrobox actually. So how the script was working before to export the apps and the binaries. Now it's not compatible anymore. So you have to re-export them to the new version. I think it's an acceptable thing because it improved dramatically how the entering the Distrobox now works, how the weird things like character escaping and all that, really things that you don't think on the spot. You only think when people report the bug, right? And I think it's okay to have this type of breaking bug fixes, as long as you're not really mission critical. So I agree with Linux, but I mean that's the Linux kernel, so
Yeah,
that's pretty much.
Well, I think it also matters if
Too
you're
important.
properly documenting what those changes are as well. Like, if you make a breaking change and then just don't mention it, you're going to get people that are going to be like, what do I do now? Like, what's happened to my application? Like, why does it no longer start, or whatever reason they have.
That's why in the release notes I wrote this big the warning about this, and also the fix. I also put there which command to run to just re-export everything so that it still works for you. So that's, I think, nice etiquette to do that. But yeah, as long as it's this stuff, fixing bugs, it's, I think, more important for software than keeping the not breaking stuff rule, I think.
Well, I think it also depends on like what the issue is, because there's a difference between it being a bug and the way something works, right? Like, if it's actually a bug causing actual issues, maybe I'm wording this terribly, but if it's a bug causing actual issues, at some point that is going to overwrite the sort of user desires for things to not change in their workflow. But if it's something like, a good example that I've liked to bring up is, are you aware that in GNU grep, fgrep and egrep are deprecated?
Yep.
Yeah, and they've been deprecated.
I stumbled upon that.
Yeah, and they've been deprecated for about 16 years now. Most people have no idea about this, and it's a change they want to make in the project, but there are so many legacy scripts out there that are tied to using fgrep, and if they remove fgrep, it is going to break so many systems. And that's one of those changes where it's something they want to change. It's not fundamentally changing what the application does. It's just shifting the way it works in a slightly different way. And especially, as you said, like, it depends on like where you are in that like importance on your system. Because if something like grep makes a change like that, there are so many things that rely on grep working a specific way that is going to cause a lot of changes outside of grep to also need to be made. So in cases like that, you sort of need to weigh like, how much of an effect is this change really going to have, and is this change something that really makes sense to actually do, or is it just, I don't even know the reason why they want to change it in grep. Like, I think it's because it's not part of POSIX or something. Technically, it never was.
Yeah, probably that. I think it's in that case. I mean, 16 years of deprecation is.
Yeah.
If people didn't notice in 16 years, maybe I don't know if there is a communication problem.
They keep saying it on the mailing list, and no one outside of the GNU project reads the GNU mailing list. That's probably
exactly
why.
I don't know. I never used egrep on fgrep. I just use the POSIX thing.
Mhm.
If I can stick to POSIX, I try to stick as much as possible to
Right.
POSIX. I don't know if they were printing a deprecation warning.
They were
That
also
would have
printing a
helped.
deprecate. So it's gone through multiple steps. It's gone just deprecated and mentioned in the documentation as deprecated, then a bigger warning in the thing, and now I think in the past couple of months they added a deprecation notice when you run egrep and fgrep that now say this is deprecated, stop using this. I feel like it's gonna still be deprecated for another 5 years, considering the state it's been in.
Yeah,
But
probably at that point it's okay to remove. But yeah, I think it's that there are, I think, ways that one can I don't know, work around this type of deprecations. Like, for example, making an egrep and fgrep optional packages that are just, wrappers around grep-e or -f, right? So that you can remove that and then still have the backward compatibility on older system where you just want that thing to work. But I think, like, backwards compatibility is important unless it's really, I don't know, how you say it, holding back the progress and creating an maintenance burden. Because one thing to remember is that maintenance is not easy. It's as difficult as just developing the stuff. And the problem with bugs is that they are like the all possible permutation of all the features that you are offering. So that's why, like, if you think about it, like the perception of GNOME and KDE, many people say, hey, KDE is buggier than GNOME. It's just that having so many much features, it's possible to encounter the bugs.
yeah,
And it's much more difficult to test everything, actually. Like, all the permutation of stuff, there obviously will be some corner case where if you, I don't know, click on 3 things in a different manner than usual, you will trigger a bug. So it's difficult to find stuff. While
yeah.
if you have something like a little bit more static and monolithic like GNOME, it's a little bit easier to do quality assurance, and say, okay, this is what we are offering. Let's ensure everything works. And obviously, I feel for the maintainers when the project starts growing in features and feature flags, and then you have to test everything. It happened with Distrobox. It started with like 4 flags, and now it's a lot. So I think it's important to have the freedom of deprecation. The problem is how you handle it. Yeah, for me personally, I never thought of it, to be honest. But yeah, hopefully it will come the day, because it means that people are using the software.
A great example of that, like, weird edge case that's just hard to test is, I mentioned before the blind game dev I had on the other week. He talked about an issue he had in KDE where if you have vertically offset, so you have multiple displays and they're vertically offset, he uses the feature where you can zoom in like really, really far and then move around by pushing with your mouse. If they are vertically offset, you can't actually see the top of the screen that is higher, or it's either higher or lower.
Okay.
So it cuts off part of the screen when you try to push all the way to the top, which obviously breaks menu bars and things like that. And that's just not something, because the mode he uses as well isn't the default mode to move around, because there's one where it follows the mouse and one where you push the edge and then it moves. Following the mouse is the default on KDE. Pushing on the edge is another option. So it's a weird setup where you have offset monitors and you're using the non-default option, this is just a case that really there was like one other person that had reported it as an issue, and it's one of those cases that obviously is just not going to be tested. It's one of those cases where the number of users it's going to affect is very small, and nobody thought to even try if that was working like it should.
Yeah, that's the other set of options, right? It's that's why I like opinionated projects. Actually, at least you have a stand on what your software should be and wants to do. And I know many people will, upset when the developers doesn't accept your way of using their software. And I think that's why drawing the line is so important, because you risk of making the software unmanageably big. Then you risk to have so many bugs that then you burn out, and then you don't develop the project anymore. That it's like an avalanche where one small thing leads to many big things. That's why it's so difficult to find out an equilibrium in this environment, right? It's difficult.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Software is hard. Basically, software is hard.
Yeah, especially if you're doing it in the public.
Yeah, it's one thing if you just write a script for yourself. Like my roommate showed me a script that he has it for his work. It's like it's firstly it's Visual Basic for applications, which I already don't want to look at because it's a Excel macro. So it basically what it does is it takes a bunch of images you dump into a form and then formats them the way it should be formatted, and that script is written for that form and no other form. There is like 3 lines of documentation. The guy who wrote it 5 years ago, doesn't remember a single way it's supposed to work. He's actually in the process of rewriting it because it's easier to just rewrite it than modify it. And he was trying to take that and then get it to fit in some other file. And it's just like, this is a disaster to look at. And when you're writing something for yourself or just that is going to be used for a specific case, it's very easy to just cut corners and write it. Like, all of my personal scripts are written like that. They cut corners. It's made for my system. I don't care. But when you're dealing with other people are going to do things in a way that you never expected. One of my favorite examples is with the Arch automatic installer. When they first made it, nobody had tested if you put in incorrect input. So if you put it, it would ask you a yes or no question. If you put in Y, it goes forward. Put in no, goes back. Sure, fair, whatever. If you put in A or S or anything else, it just crashes because they didn't actually check for incorrect input. And that's something that the second you have other people using it, you're going to notice that there are problems that you didn't even consider were possible problems. And that's just software related issues. It doesn't even get into different hardware that people might have, whether it's different GPUs or CPUs, or they're using a hard drive or an SSD, or different monitor resolutions. All of these things, as soon as other people are touching your project, you're going to realize there's more problems than you ever could have noticed.
Yeah. One of the example for me was the NVIDIA supporting Distrobox, because I don't actually own any NVIDIA thing, and I don't plan on ever owning anything NVIDIA. So that was pretty much relying on others to do that. So I thank a lot Mirko that helped me, because he has a lot of NVIDIA hardware. So I just SSH'd in his laptop to to test stuff. He trusted me. Thank you. Maintaining it is pretty much a blind thing for me. As long as it's, I don't know, finding the libraries and mounting them inside the container,
I can just install the drivers inside a VM and just, pattern match the files and stuff like that. It's okay. But actually checking if it's working, I cannot. So it's a pretty much blind test. So that's a little bit scary for me, but I see how many people really need that. So it's necessarily evil. I don't know. But that's why it's not on by default. Like you have to opt in the NVIDIA integration because I cannot guarantee for it, right?
Right.
And many like this unintended things are like the macOS support. People are they opened a draft pull request for the macOS support, but they don't own any Mac, so I cannot really know. Like I maybe know that their tests are going good, but then I have to maintain it, and I don't have a Mac. How can I maintain that thing?
Right.
It's difficult. It's difficult.
Yeah, that's a rough one. I didn't even know that there was a pull request here for it. Oh, there's a lot of back and forth here. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty much open to. I'm happy if people use my software. I still don't. I can't still believe that people are using my software. So that's a good thing. On the other hand, it's a responsibility, and you can take it lightly. Just okay, with a couple of files it works on Mac, and then only half the thing work on Mac.
Right.
I cannot ship that because, or at least not like this, because people then see a guide on how Distrobox works, then they run it on the Mac, and half of the things doesn't work, and then they will just open bugs because they feel like it's a bug. And maybe some things cannot work at all because on Mac, a Podman or a Docker container is actually running inside a VM. So there is all this abstraction and separation from the host, which it's even harder to circumvent than the plain Docker and Podman thing. So the point
that
of
sounds like a
Distrobox is,
nightmare to work with. So it
Yeah,
just runs in a
exactly,
virtual machine.
Yeah, they don't have many choices. They don't have a Linux kernel, so they need to run a VM.
Yeah.
But then the problem is, how do I integrate X11 on macOS that doesn't have X11?
There
Or
were
Wayland.
X11
Yeah, there is
servers in the
Xquark.
past. Yeah.
Yes, there is Xquark, but I mean, it's pretty deprecated stuff. Like, it's like fgrep for them. Like, it's very old stuff. And then if, I don't know, the graphic stuff doesn't work, then what? Like, already half of the things are not working, right?
Right.
GPU acceleration will never work because it's inside a VM. And so it's useful only for CLI stuff, which is still useful, but it's like a third of the thing that the software is expected to do.
Right, it has value as like a development environment, but yeah. At least
but there are dev containers for that.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It's a lot less useful then, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the point is integration. If I can't integrate what I'm doing,
yeah, that's well, hopefully that gets dealt with at some point. But it sounds like there's a lot of issues there that just don't exist on the Linux side.
Actually, the funny thing is that WSL works.
Okay.
Because they have the WSL virtual machine thing. Actually has all the plumbing for Wayland, X11, all that stuff. So that Distrobox actually works on that, which is strange because
did it just work without any extra configuration, or do you have to like write some specific as well?
If I remember correctly, there was just one workaround to do, which is like making the root are shared the mount,
Mhm.
because by default it wasn't. And yeah, that was pretty much it. I think in the newer distro version, it's actually done by default.
Mhm.
So also on Crostini, it was working for the same reason. They already did the plumbing for the audio, for the GPU, for the whatever. So this was cool to leverage that,
Mhm.
right? And it was pretty much a thing about, yeah, changing a couple of things, of mounts or flags. It wasn't that big of a deal.
Mhm.
With macOS, we don't have that. We have plain Docker, plain Podman, where the isolation is very pretty much maximum, because you're running inside an isolated VM, not an integrated VM. So it's almost like I have to do twice the job
Right.
of integrating back stuff. So it's I don't think it's as easy. I
Mhm.
will need probably a Mac for that. If I ever will, yeah, I can work on that.
Mhm. So, I think it's fair to say you never expected Distrobox to get the attention that it initially got.
Nope, not at all. I mean, it's I can see how people find it useful, but on the other hand, it's like a wrapper of Podman and Docker that exists for 15 years.
Mhm.
It's not something that you expect to have good adoption. You expect it to be useful for corner cases,
Mhm.
not the other way around, right? So it's I'm obviously very happy about it, a
Mhm.
bit scared about it, but yeah.
Well, I think that's as good a message to end it on. We're closing in on the 2 hour mark, and I know you said you have to go to work after this, so let's wrap this up then. If somebody wants to get involved in Distrobox or support the project, whatever, like where can they go for that?
On GitHub,
GitHub?
github.com slash 89 Luca 89 slash Distrobox,
Mhm. You don't
or
have like
whatever, or Lilypod, or
you don't have like a, I don't know, like GitHub sponsor, Patreon, or anything else like that. It's just
nope,
no.
no. I'm just happy if people contribute.
I see there is a Matrix room and a Telegram here as well.
Yes, if they want to chat, there is the Matrix chat and the Telegram chat.
Okay. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to shout out or anything you want to say?
I mean, I'm very grateful for having the possibility of talking with you.
I'm happy we finally got
Thank
to
you very
do this
much.
after so much time.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it's yeah, I'm more than happy to do another one in the future if you want to. I don't know what we talk about, but I'm more than happy to do another one.
whenever. Yeah, I mean, probably in a bit, maybe we can speak about news of the atomic world.
For sure. Well, if you have nothing else to mention, I'll do my outro and then we can end it off. Awesome.
Perfect.
So if you like this and you want to see more of my stuff, my main channel is Brody Robertson. I do Linux videos there 6 days a week. I've got my gaming channel, Brody on Games. Right now, I'm playing through Neo: The World Ends With You, and probably still God of War 2. If you're listening to the audio version of this, you can find the video version on YouTube at Tech Over Tea. If you want to hear the audio, there is a RSS feed. There is stuff on Spotify. Search Tech Over Tea on your favorite platform, and you will find it. I'll give you the final word. What do you want to say? How do you want to end this off?
Thank you, everyone, and bye.
See you guys later.